Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Here to bring in part 24 of What If Sonic and his friends were in Remnant. Link down description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 49, Desert Warfare. Hey everyone, welcome back. Last chapter left off at quite the cliffhanger, didn't it? Well, before we learn more about what happened there with RWBY, Weiss, and everyone else, this time we're going back to Vacuo as Team Dark JNPR searches for the Chaos Emerald in that region, as well as investigates the brewing situation within the Desert Kingdom. Things are about to get rather intense for our heroes as they may soon find that corruption and monsters run deeper beneath the sands than they realize. Before we begin however, I want us to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the unfortunate passing of Hideki Sato, a former president of Sega and creator of nearly every Sega console. This may have been one of the people who helped brought Sonic the Hedgehog to life. May he rest in peace. Now, with that out of the way, let's get this chapter started. Desert Warfare. It was nighttime in Vacuo, and like any other desert at night, the temperature had dropped from scalding hot to near freezing cold. But the sky had undergone probably the most drastic change, as all the stars were now clearly visible alongside the shattered moon of Remnant, which provided enough illumination that one didn't need a light to navigate through the sandy and rocky landscape. Currently, the trio of Omega, Pyrrha, and Star had arrived at their destination, lying flat on a stone cliffside that gave them a view of an abandoned dust refinery, which had various small buildings and large metal stacks pointing upward, as well as a large and semi-broken man-made barrier surrounding most of the perimeter. The facility was roughly the size of a small village that could probably house 100 or so people. But what drew the attention of the three were the sights of ant-like Grimm that crawled around the facility. These were mermaids, and they appeared to relatively small in comparison to many of the Grimm they've seen before, like roughly half the size of a Beowulf as they crawled on all 6 of their legs like normal ants, but their pincers appeared to be plenty sharp, and their demonic appearance was still unsettling. There were those that crawled alongside the ground around the refinery like guards, as well as those that scaled up and down the walls of the buildings and stacks, and those that crawled higher up appeared to have insect-like wings on their backs. These are the mermaids. Pyrrha observed through a pair of night vision goggles. At first glance, one doesn't seem all that impressive. One on its own can be killed easily enough, sure. Star said. But a whole swarm of them. That's another story. There is far greater movement within the facility as well. Omega reported. A larger quantity of mermaids is presently unseen. And there's probably a ton more underground too. Star noted seriously. Shadow then suddenly appeared behind them via his teleportation before he addressed the group. There appear to be 2 main entrances into the refinery, one on the south side and the other on the north. The mermaids don't seem to be venturing out too far and are likely guarding the facility. Though I have yet to see any human life in the general area. Sensors do not indicate any badnik signals either. Omega said. Eggman has not arrived yet. So, there's nobody else here but us. Pyrrha commented. Which means, there's no need for us to hold back either. Star smiled somewhat. We'll come in from 3 points. Shadow instructed. I'll drop in from above and lure the flyers to me. Omega, you come in from the north, Pyrrha and Star will take the south. If it looks like you are about to be overwhelmed, send a signal flare however you can and fall back. We'll rendezvous here. Understood. Pyrrha nodded. Chaos Emerald Retrieval Grimm Extermination Mission, commencing operation. Omega declared as his weapons locked and loaded. Shadow then once again teleported, appearing well above the facility, his own silhouette reflected in the bright white light of the shattered moon before he fell. He waved his hand to throw out a volley of chaos spears that struck several of the stacks, obliterating the mermaids there and drawing the attention of every ant-like Grimm in the facility. Those surviving on the rooftops gave loud and shrill insect-like calls, almost like sounding an alarm before all the flyers expanded their wings and shot upwards to meet their descending adversary. Shadow could see well over 3 dozen flying Grimm ants coming in his direction and was quick to draw a rondite to slice and bisect one flyer that came at him quickly enough and performed a spindish to zoom at a second and smash it before firing a rondite's rifle form to his left while also snapping his fingers to create an explosion of chaos energy on his right to tear away all the Grimm at his sides while the rest of the flyers attempted to swarm him. On the north side of the facility, All the ground-based mermaids were drawn by the explosions and flashes of red and yellow light in the sky above them, which made them vulnerable for an explosion of fire to rip through the entrance and burn away 5 mermaids at once. All of those in the general area had their attention drawn in by Omega, who quickly zoomed into the refinery with his jet boosters. Creatures of Grimm, prepare for immediate disembowelment. The mermaids cried out in alarm and aggression as they attempted to crawl forward to meet their mechanical foe, but Omega was already on them as he fired a volley of missiles to tear through the frontmost mermaids and had entered the facility, drawing the attention of every mermaid in the area. Omega's sensors pinpointed each and every mermaid that came towards him along the building walls and even those that began to emerge from the ground. With his targets rapidly being locked on, Omega fired his machine gun hands and made precise headshots on any Grimm he saw, utilizing both his own ammunition as well as dust rounds that resulted in gunfire and elemental power tearing through various mermaids. But even as he shot and gunned them down, more and more began to reveal themselves, crawling out from inside the ruined buildings and even from underground, making a total of 50 as they surrounded Omega from all sides. On the south side of the facility, the mermaids within that area attempted to crawl towards the source of the explosions on the far end of the refinery, only for a tornado of wind and sand to appear in the middle of a group, which began to sweep up all the ant-like Grimm, pulling them into the vortex before it was set on fire. The flaming tornado then exploded, evaporating all the Grimm in the area as well as clearing out several old buildings and making a further path for Star and Pyrrha to tread onward, the elder maiden at the lead as her eyes glowed, indicating the activation of her own powers while the younger one kept her powers inactive for the time being, but had Milo and Akoo drawn as she kept her eyes flashing in all directions to pick up any stragglers. And that proved to be wise as a pair of mermaids emerged from the ground and left side and attempted to lunge at the pair, but Pyrrha had thrown out Akoo to her right side to bisect the mermaid while also lunging Akoo's javelin form like a spear to pierce through the face of the second, killing it instantly while using her polarity to recall her shield. I can see why they would prefer to attack in swarms. Pyrrha noted. Alone, they're rather fragile. Again, don't let your guard down. The drones are easy. But the hard mermaids. Star began, but before she could finish, the ground in front of them exploded upward as 4 large figures appeared before them. These were much larger forms of the ant-based Grimm, appearing 3 times the size of their smaller brethren and standing above the 2 maidens, with thick white bone-like armor covering nearly every inch of their bodies, save for their glowing red eyes. Those are a bit more troublesome. Star finished as she drew her weapon, a 3-section staff that had a fan-like blade on one end and a claw-like attachment on the second. In the air, Shadow performed a homing attack to one flying mermaid, obliterating it on contact and threw a chaos spear outwards to blow up a group of 3 that came at him from his left while using Arondite's rifle mode to gun down the mermaids that appeared directly underneath him. Using his air shoes to hover in the air briefly, Shadow saw himself surrounded on all sides by over 20 flying mermaids. All of them flew in with snarls as they attempted to overwhelm him completely. But as they closed in, Shadow teleported above them, resulting in the swarm colliding with one another before Shadow threw another chaos spear downwards to carve a hole through the swarm before spin dashing straight down. Arondite's blade pointed outward for a blade spindish that he used to carve through all the mermaids close to him, already carving through half of the flyers before landing on a nearby rooftop. The remaining flyers all flew down towards him. Shadow stood completely unfazed before he performed a black tornado attack, which not pulled in all the flyers, but tore through the roof of the unstable building he was on. The entire upper half of the building collapsed in on itself as all the debris was pulled into the black tornado, which smashed into the mermaids who all were smashed into each other before they were all finished. Shadow appeared in the middle of a room with half of the building now completely obliterated and looked around briefly to see what was left of some old beds and furniture scattered on the floor. This must have been a dormitory for workers to rest and even sleep overnight when not working in the mines. Too bad that none of them made it out alive. The black hedgehog didn't get a chance to silently mourn for the lives lost as he felt the floor under him shake before something big emerged from it with a pair of large pincers. Shadow boosted upward with his air shoes to avoid being caught in the pincers of a hard mermaid that tried to snap at him. He then zoomed downward with Arondite pointed forward to pierce into the left eye of the hard mermaid. He took a brief moment to test the armor of the thrashing Grimm by feeling it with his hand. It was sturdy, probably enough to survive a series of gunshots. but with enough force, it should be able to crack. With that in mind, Shadow channeled some chaos energy directly into Arondite and drove it deeper into the RWBY mermaid's eye before slicing upward to eviscerate its whole head. Once that Grim was slain, Shadow zoomed away from the ruined dormitory and appeared on the ground near the building's base, only to turn around at the sounds of a wall breaking open and look to see two more RWBY mermaids breaking out from what was left of the building and advancing on him. Omega veered backwards to avoid the lunging pincers of one of two RWBY mermaids that he faced. The former badnik fired his machine guns at the giant Grim ants to test their outer armor, and could see his bullets having minimal effect. Assessment complete. Standard firearms and Grim elimination procedures inefficient. Omega observed. Unorthodox methods may be required. Deactivating his guns, Omega locked his feet down and held his arms forward, motioning for the enemy Grim to come to him directly, which they did. The closest RWBY mermaid came at him and lunged its pincers at him, which Omega caught with his mechanical hands as it attempted to push him back, but Omega stood his ground as he held the giant ant monster back. Analyzing. Strength factor equivalent to that of Deathstalker. Omega observed. Thicker and denser exoskeletal armor however makes RWBY mermaid far heavier and more durable. Huntsman fatalities likely a result of inferior weaponry, and inability to break through armored shell. The second RWBY mermaid came at him from his sides while Omega seemed focused on the first. However, Omega was able to use this to his advantage as he spun his upper body around at a 270-degree angle, taking the RWBY mermaid he was holding with him and slamming it into its brethren, knocking them both down. Potential solution: use superior strength to test RWBY mermaid exo armor against its own. Omega declared as he hauled the first RWBY mermaid up and over himself, still holding it by its pincers, and slammed it down onto the second one while it was down. Omega then flew straight up with his jet boosters and soared back down, his right fist held back as far as he could before slamming down with extra boost from his back and threw out the hardest punch he could muster, smashing into the RWBY mermaid on top, and further smashing it into the one below. Already the ground underneath the sand was breaking apart, creating a crater underneath both of them before Omega brought both his metallic fists down at once to further smash them. That's when Omega noticed a crack on the RWBY mermaid's armor from where he struck. Armor integrity compromised. Weak point isolated. Commencing Grim evisceration with extreme prejudice. He delivered multiple rapid punches with the speed and force equivalent to a jackhammer in overdrive, all of it focused on that one point as the armor began to crack more, with the cracks spreading even further. Not only that, but each strike also rapidly drove the top RWBY mermaid harder into the one below as its own armor began to break apart from all the pressure. Seeing both Grim were about to meet their end, Omega shot himself upward one last time. Gravity dust missiles loaded. He made sure both Grim had the chance to look up at him directly, where their weakened red eyes saw his cold and glaring optics. The last thing they would ever see would be their destroyer. You are terminated. He fired a pair of missiles lined with gravity dust, both of whom made their impact on the weak point he made. Boom. Asterisk. An explosion of purple energy blew the RWBY mermaids to pieces. The first one was blown apart, destroyed with its bone armor and black insides being splattered in all directions, while the one below was crushed completely, leaving it nothing more than a blackened stain. Those remains began to disintegrate like any other slain Grim as Omega landed to observe his handiwork. RWBY mermaid targets and all other Grim within the general area, completely destroyed. Star slammed her hands on the ground, her eyes still glowing with bright purple flames as she raised a large stone wall in front of herself and Pyrrha, with the intent of keeping the RWBY mermaids at bay. However, not long after they were raised, those same mermaids were able to break their way through with their armored bodies and advance on the two maidens, with Pyrrha gasping shock before readying herself for battle as Star charged the first two. With her eyes still glowing, Star channeled her powers directly into the fan end of her staff as it turned red before lighting on fire, which she spun over her head to generate a wheel of flames as she met the RWBY mermaid in front of her and brought the flaming wheel down at its front, creating an explosion that allowed Star a chance to leap over and land on its back. She held her free hand upwards as she generated a large spear made entirely out of ice, which also surged with electricity before she leapt off the RWBY mermaid on the side and threw her electric ice spear right into its left eye before further channeling her power to further extend the ice spear and pierce deeper into the head before melting it into water. Due to the lightning already being charged into the ice, the second it melted, electrify ripped through the RWBY mermaid's head before it exploded, killing that one. Pyrrha, go for the eyes. They're the only soft spot. Star called to her as she rolled on the ground and the second RWBY mermaid charged her. I understand. Pyrrha quickly ran backwards to get some distance from the other two RWBY mermaids that charged at her. With a subtle red flame from her eyes, Pyrrha channeled some wind power into her feet for an extra boost of speed to quickly double the length of the gap between herself and her heavily armored foes. She found a cargo container and quickly leapt to the top of it before configuring Milo into her rifle mode. Looking through the scope, Pyrrha spotted the big red eyes of one of the charging RWBY mermaids and fired. With her expert precision, she was able to shoot out the eyes of the first one, causing it to stop in its tracks as it was rendered blind. But the second one charged faster than she expected, already closing the distance as she was focused on the first one before it rammed the cargo container she was on, though she had already jumped off and rolled across the ground when she landed. Pyrrha recovered quickly enough to see the RWBY mermaid charging at her again and decided to focus on its legs. She threw a Ko forward, and channeled some extra wind power into it, making sure to focus the winds as tightly as she could, so that it not only spun faster but its edges were much sharper. Fortunately, she was able to slice off the legs of the giant armored ant-based Grim on its left side, causing it to tumble over before it could reach her. Pyrrha sighed with relief as she felt she at least crippled her enemies. Only to gasp in shock as the RWBY mermaid she previously blinded barreled through the area, smashing into a building with its whole body, breaking much of the wall before it charged in her general direction. Though Pyrrha dashed out of the way to avoid the charge, she watched as she saw the blind RWBY mermaid smash its way into a building, which further smashed and crashed inside before the building began to crumble as it crawled out. Even when blinded, this Grim is still plenty dangerous. Pyrrha thought before looking to the one that had its left legs cut off as it tried to crawl forward on its right legs and slowly making distance. I can't just settle with crippling them, that's only the first step. But their armor is plenty tough. I need something strong too. Pyrrha's thoughts were interrupted as it saw the blind RWBY mermaid smash into a metal smokestack, denting it. Wait, metal. That's when Pyrrha looked all around her and saw how most of the buildings around her were made of metal, at least for the most part. Not to mention various cargo containers that were probably made for dust transportation. There was indeed a lot of metal around her. A smile crossed the girl's face. Back with Star, she faced off against a single RWBY mermaid as she pulled up a rather large boulder from the ground before delivering a spinning kick to send the rock crashing into the face of the giant armored ant Grim, briefly disorienting it before she dashed and slid underneath it while thrusting her hand up to raise a large rock spike just as she slid out from the other side. The spike had managed to push the RWBY mermaid upwards and crack the armor, slightly piercing it but not enough to completely stab it. But with it kept up in the air, Star quickly flew straight upwards as she spun her staff again, further channeling her maiden powers into the fan blade as it glowed white this time. She spun it around like before generating a circle of wind that was likely sharper than any man-made blade. She flew straight upwards, giving herself an extra boost with flames from her feet, towards its neck and lunged the wind circle forward to slice through its neck and decapitate it. Star smirked as she continued to hover in her spot and looked to see the RWBY mermaid's carcass evaporate. Before she could celebrate however, the sounds of metal crashing and bending drew her attention to her side as she looked in surprise to see the metal smokestacks toppling over onto each other, smashing and burying the two crippled RWBY mermaids that Pyrrha was facing. Speaking of Pyrrha, the girl was now hovering in the air, her eyes glowing with bright red flames as she lifted both her hands up high, using her polarity to levitate multiple empty cargo containers over her person, along with whatever piece of broken metal debris that was in the area before throwing them all at the pile of metal that had pinned the two large Grim underneath. Some of them even hit the RWBY mermaids, doing some damage to their armor before the last of it was all thrown. I wish you were here, Nora, because you would have loved to see this. Pyrrha said as her arms charged with electricity before she lunged them straight down, shooting a large beam of lightning straight at the pile of debris. In one instant, the metal in the pile supercharged with electricity to electrocute the RWBY mermaids underneath before it all exploded. Boom. Asterisk. Anyone could see the Grim underneath didn't survive, given how there was nothing left but a scorching crater filled with charred metal and ruins. Taking a moment to catch her breath, Pyrrha set herself on the ground a small distance away and put her hands on her knees. After a few seconds, Star sat down next to her and put her hand on her shoulder. "Good work," she smiled. Pyrrha smiled back. "A bit blunter than I would have liked," she said as she caught her breath. "I'm still not used to going all out like that. Sometimes a blunt approach is the best one. You just gotta know when to use it," Star replied. "But not a bad way to get your feet wet there, maiden sis." Pyrrha smiled and blushed at the praise. At the same time, Shadow faced off against the last two RWBY mermaids within the middle of the facility. After determining their armor was too thick for a frontal attack with his sword, gun, or spears, the Black Hedgehog decided to prey on their weakness and turn their heavy armor against them. Using his own speed, and charging a Rondite with chaos energy, Shadow zoomed straight past one RWBY mermaid before zooming back, completely severing its legs. The second one appeared to come at him from behind, but he simply teleported behind it and repeated the process to cut off all 6 of that's one legs. Though both were still alive, they were now completely immobile, reduced to mere stumps that snarled and thrashed. Deciding to finish this, Shadow threw a chaos spear into the eye of one RWBY mermaid and then followed through with another into that same hole to obliterate its head from the inside, and then repeated the same method on the other, causing its own head to collapse. Both of the RWBY mermaids would then disintegrate not long after. Standing still for a moment and listening closely for any other possible movement, Shadow heard nothing and determined there were no more Grimm on the surface. Now was the time to regroup and venture deeper into the facility. The 4 of them regrouped at the entrance of a man-made tunnel that led downward at a diagonal angle, with a series of tracks on both sides. This is likely what miners used to cart up their dust findings from down below. Shadow assumed as he kicked one rock to send it rolling down, where they heard a series of echoes. Omega. Scanning, no Grimm detected within the tunnels. Omega reported. At least at this level. There's probably hundreds more down there. Star said seriously before looking at Pyrrha. You know, you could go back to the city now. I've already made it this far, and I won't turn back. She interrupted. That said, I believe using our powers recklessly down there would pose us problems. Aside from the Grimm, we don't know how structurally sound this mine is, or how much raw dust is still left down there. One mistake, and we'll be buried alive, and that's the best case scenario. The Grimm themselves will also pose a problem. Shadow said. Theodore was quite correct. The strength of this type of Grimm comes from overwhelming force. Individually, even the stronger RWBY mermaids are not invincible. But as a larger swarm, he looked to all 3 of his companions. No one goes anywhere alone. We don't even split into pairs. We find the Chaos Emerald, and the second we do, I'll use Chaos Control to pull us out of there. An effective strategy. Omega approved. Yeah, wonder when it'll go wrong. Star commented. Let's go then. Pyrrha took a deep breath before she followed Shadow into the mine, with Omega and Star right beside her. Shade Academy. Rumpel stood at the gates of Vacuo's combat school as she faced a rather large group in front of her. Said group consisted of Team JNPR, sans Pyrrha, standing alongside Rouge, Team CFVY along with Cardin, and Team NDGO, alongside another student huntress, who was a young woman with tan skin, dark hair tied in dreads, wearing a primarily red outfit and dark sunglasses. Rumpel also glanced to her right towards the gates of Shade to see Whisper perched there, keeping her distance but still being relatively close to the overall group. Alright, everyone listen up. Rumpel got their attention. The time has come for nightly patrol. For those who haven't participated before, she eyed the non-Vacuo individuals. I'll explain the details. You'll be patrolling the streets, keeping your eyes peeled for any troublemakers or dangerous criminals. If you see anything that looks suspicious, don't waste your time calling for any authorities like you have before in Vale or other places, act immediately. Because just those few seconds of taking out your scroll and alerting someone can mean the difference between life and death. There is no procedure or guidelines or strict protocol here in Vacuo. The only things I care for are actions and results. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am. John and Coco both said, speaking for their respective teams before they shared eye contact and smiled slightly. Though this time, I also encourage you to be extra vigilante. Rumpel continued. Many of you are probably already aware by now, but several professional huntsmen and students have gone missing these past couple of weeks, which is why I encourage you all to stay within your respective groups and keep within the main streets. You can't protect anyone if you get taken or killed yourself. Now, with that being said, you'll be organized into groups that are different from your current teams. This caused everyone to look in surprise and curiosity, with Rouge looking the most curious. Professor Rumpel, if you don't mind me asking, Ren spoke up. Wouldn't it make more sense to stick with those you're more familiar with if a fight were to break out? You'd think, but out of the people present here, only about a third at most are more familiar with this city than the rest of you. Rumpel explained. You'll need that to help guide you through these streets and the people. At the same time, it also serves as a lesson of sorts. You can't always depend on a teammate to bail you out if something were to go wrong. You may soon find yourself cut off from your partners, or stuck with someone unfamiliar to you. In that situation, you can either find a way to adapt and survive, or become stagnant and die. She said seriously, causing many of the students to look worried, while Rouge kept a serious gaze on the teacher. Ah, what's wrong? Nebula mocked the Beacon teams. Scared now that you can't hold your friend's hands. Nora and John both growled, but kept themselves from lashing out, though Ren did look to Nora with a bit of concern. Now don't worry, you'll still be paired with someone that you know and are familiar with, just someone on the same original team as you. Rumpel said. So, here are your group assignments. Group A will consist of John Ark, Coco Ottle, Cardin Winchester, and Umber Gorgonane. You'll be searching the north side of the city. John did breathe some relief to know he was paired with Coco, who looked a bit concerned herself. Though John didn't like the idea of being paired with Cardin, he'd suck it up and find a way to endure it, though Cardin did look somewhat hopeful. He also saw the only person he didn't recognize, the girl with the sunglasses, and hoped that she was at least friendlier than anyone in Team NDGO. Group B, which will patrol the south side, will have Nora Valkyrie, Velvet Scarlatina, Nebula Violette, and the one you refer to as Whisper. Rumpel continued. Just don't get in my way. Nebula said to her new teammates warningly, and while Velvet did look nervous, Nora only glared at her. That's not so bad, the pink-clad girl thought to herself. Velvet's cool, and at least we got my guardian angel looking after me. She eyed Whisper with a smile. Group C has Rouge, Fox Alistair, Du Gale, and Gwen Darcy. Rumpel instructed. You'll patrol the east side. Hold on, you said no one from the same team would be paired together. Fox pointed out. I was referring to those not from Shade. Rumpel explained. Alright, if you say so. Rouge shrugged. Sup, ladies. She gave a friendly wave to Du and Gwen, who only looked at her questionably. But the white bat still seemed suspicious about this whole thing. And finally, Group D will have Lai Ren, Yatsuhashi Daichi, and Octavia Ember, and you'll patrol the west. Rumpel said. And while this group only consists of 3 as opposed to 4, don't let that discourage you. Think of it as an extra challenge to push yourself. Understood. Ren nodded as he and Yatsuhashi looked to each other with smiles and nods, but Octavia rolled her eyes. Good, now move out. Rumpel ordered, prompting the students within their respective groups to move out, stepping out of the Shade Academy gates and into the city of Vacuo. Group A trekked through the streets on the north side of the city, John doing his best to observe every possible thing that looked suspicious. Though, if he was being honest, this whole city looked suspicious, especially so at night. It was far less busy as most of the people were now inside, probably asleep, or drinking at any of the local taverns he saw. Though he did spot a few people just casually leaning against the buildings and making some conversation, though most, if not all of them, carried some sort of small weapon like a knife or a gun. John wondered silently if these were either criminals plotting something, or just average citizens with only basic weapons that they would need to defend themselves in case they were the victims. This really gave John the moment for it to really sink in just how different Vacuo was from Vale. It was easier to tell the difference between criminals and civilians. Those looking to make trouble usually made it pretty obvious and could be spotted easily enough. But from what he was seeing, everyone in Vacuo looked like they were going to cause trouble. It made more sense the more he thought about it. Vale had a natural defense with the mountain walls as well as local police and huntsmen, while Vacuo was a far harsher environment where just outside the city was the endless sands of the desert and countless grim. Really sells it, doesn't it? Coco asked as she stepped closer to him. What? John blinked as he was taken out of his thoughts. Just how different the rest of the world is. Coco commented. Oh, yeah, it really does. John nodded. Have you ever done work outside of Vale, Coco? Been to Mistral once, during our second semester of our first year. Coco explained. We didn't participate in any missions, just got a look at the city. It was a way for us to get a glimpse of what the outside world may be like once we graduate. But even then, Mistral has still got nothing on this place. It at least has stable mountains, but vacuo. One sandstorm and about half the city needs to be rebuilt. No kidding, John agreed. So, what exactly did you plan on doing once you graduated Beacon? Just curious. Oh, my team and I were gonna travel across the world, get jobs wherever we can. Coco answered. Never been one to stay in one place too long. What about all the councils? John asked. Isn't there like a whole bunch of red tape if you're bouncing from kingdom to kingdom? It's like that for the Atlas military, right? It honestly depends on which council, not all of them operate the same way. Cardin stepped in and put his 2 cents in. Vale's a bit more open about where the huntsmen come from and what work they do. Atlas is way stricter, and I hear half of those in Mistral got criminal records miles long. And vacuo. Well, you've seen that pretty much everyone here does whatever they want, right? John blinked and stopped to look in genuine surprise. You speak like you really know this kind of thing. Well, my dad was actually a former councilman. Cardin revealed, causing John to look in surprise. Yeah, he rubbed the back of his head. I wasn't exactly into politics, but when you grow up with one of them as your dad, you do pick up a few things. Well that explains your old attitude. Coco commented. A rich kid who got whatever he wanted whenever he asked for it, right? Why yeah, pretty much. Cardin admitted, looking away somewhat. Never would have guessed. John said. So, what made you want to be a huntsman, then? He asked curiously. It honestly seemed the more fun. Cardin said with a shrug. All that paperwork stuff my dad does was boring. At least with the Grim, he pulled out his mace with a small smile. It's way more exciting. His smile then faded. Until it's not anymore. John and Coco both looked to him in sympathy, both knowing he was referring to the Battle of Beacon that claimed the lives of all his teammates. Let me guess, a friend died. Umber Gorgonian finally spoke up, getting all their attention. No wait, she observed Cardin closely, even with her sunglasses. It was your whole team. Cardin's eyes widened in shock. How did? It's written all over your face. Umber replied. The look of shame and mourning. And after listening to your backstory, it makes sense. A rich kid who once never had anything bad happen to him is suddenly faced with the cold harsh reality of the world and regrets any and all mistakes you might or might have made, thinking if you did anything different, your little friends would be alive, right? The way Umber spoke implied that she'd seen that kind of thing before, leading to Coco to look at her suspiciously as she didn't exactly like the tone Umber was speaking in. Even John looked to Cardin in surprise to see him actually backing away slightly. That's how the world works, big boy. Umber said. It's dark and cruel. And huntsmen are no exception to it. You either stand tall and at the top, or get knocked down to the bottom and swallowed by the sands. Are those muscles of yours just for show? She poked at his arm, which caused him to back away slightly. If so, then throw away that fancy mace of yours and go back to Vale. 'Cause Vacuo's got no place for weaklings who fall apart the minute something goes wrong. Hey, John stepped in, pushing Umber away as he stood in front of the surprised Cardin. Dude just recently lost his friends. You don't have to disrespect him like that. What, you want me to cry with him and sing him a little song to cheer him up? Umber mocked. I would think that maybe someone training to be a huntress, someone whose job it is to protect people, would be a bit more respectful to the loss of life. John argued. Newsflash for you, kid, everyone dies. Umber argued. It doesn't matter what you are, or what job you get, nobody's immortal. Tell that to Ozpin, John thought but kept quiet as Umber continued. His friends are dead, so what? He can either go cry in a corner or keep fighting. Simple as that. Oh, if it's really that simple, why are you even at Shade? Coco questioned as well. Why train to be a huntress? 'Cause I'm a fighter. Umber answered with a smirk. Always have been. If being a huntress means I can fight and not get a boring lecture from any so-called authority figures, then sign me. I don't care if it's people or Grimm, you want to fight with me. She pulled out a series of whips from her sides and snapped them. I'll take you up on it, and it'll be the last thing you ever do. John only glared at her. This woman was only training just to have a legal excuse to fight and beat people up. She wasn't remotely interested in protecting anyone. She probably wouldn't even care if there was a massacre. He'd honestly wanted to teach her a lesson right here and now, but remembered he had a job to focus on and people to protect. That was his resolve and responsibility, to protect those closest to him, as well as anyone else that couldn't defend themselves. He had that lesson pounded into him quite literally, and it only made him that much stronger. Think you're tough, huh? Then prove it, John challenged. Show me what you can do here. If a fight breaks out, let's see you handle yourself. Umber grinned almost maliciously at him. Challenge accepted. She brushed past him and took the lead of the group. Thanks, Cardin said to John, causing him to look to his former bully, who seemed relieved and grateful. I mean it, John. Thanks for that. John only gave a single nod. No problem. With that, they continued their patrol while Coco looked to her fellow team leader with a smile of approval. On the south end of the city, Group B continued to walk down the main streets and appeared to find nothing that was worth causing a fuss over. There didn't even seem to be any pickpockets or small-time thieves like there were during the day, at least not at first glance. Nora had seen some situations like this during her time growing up with Ren in Mistral, where things seemed quiet and peaceful at first, only for something to wait in the shadows to pounce, so she wasn't about to let her guard down. Looking to her side, Nora saw Velvet appeared a little bit nervous, and it was hard not to blame her. An empty desert city like this did seem rather creepy at nighttime. That is until Nora looked upwards to the bright and starry sky, where she caught a glimpse of Whisper hopping from rooftop to rooftop, her hood and mask still covering most of her face. But even then, Whisper would take a few moments to look through the scope of her custom Wispon, peering into the surrounding dark alleys and finding nothing, before looking down in Nora's direction and giving a thumbs up, showing that everything was all clear. Nora smiled back and gave a thumbs up of her own. Aw, look at the cute little rabbit, all scared and timid. The sound of Nebula's mocking voice caused Nora to turn to see Velvet being harassed by the shade student. I'm not scared, Velvet argued. I'm just not used to the cold. She held her arms. Sure you are. Want me to cook up some rabbit stew to warm you up? Nebula mocked. Or how about a nice warm pancake? Nora quickly held out Magnild and pointed its mallet at Nebula, glaring at her. I usually like mine extra flat and scorched. Nora, Velvet tried to get her to back down. It's all right. No, it's not. Nora shook her head. This idiot is wasting her time being a jerk, when we got a job to do. And I'd be doing it a lot better without any deadweight like you outsiders. Nebula glared. You mean the same kind of outsiders that kicked your ass before? Nora reminded with a grin, causing Nebula to growl. Or the same kind of outsider that actually stood their ground to fight off an army of robots and Grimm, while you just ran away with your tail between your legs. Oh, and by the way, Velvet here actually fought those guys too. She gestured to the rabbit faunus. She can put up a fight just like any of us. So quit wasting time and do your damn job, unless you want to eat dirt. Nebula's teeth gnashed at this outsider who dared to call her out. Not only that, but she was also on the same team as that arc punk who got lucky during their sparring match. But this wasn't a dojo with someone watching over them, it was a dark and empty street with no witnesses. Perhaps she could teach Thunder Thighs here a lesson so that she knows who's boss around here. That is until a cloud of green smoke was suddenly blown onto the street, completely covering all three of them. Ah, what the? Nora covered her mouth and nose. What just died? This green smoke not only completely obscured her vision but also smelled worse than a rotting corpse. Before she could even react, something big grabbed her from behind and threw her into the wall of the building behind her. Likewise, Velvet and Nebula both coughed as the green-tinted smoke burned their eyes and skin, causing them both to tear up. Nora. Velvet coughed as she tried to call for her friend but was punched in the face and sent rolling across the sand by an unseen foe, and that same foe grabbed Nebula to lift her up before smashing her face first onto the ground. Whisper was immediately on the attack and had her weapon converted to its rifle mode as she looked through her mask to filter through the green smoke and see the heat signature of Nora's attacker. But before she could pull the trigger, something struck her from the side to send her rolling across the roof before she quickly recovered as her weapon switched to its hammer mode with a blue energy hammer construct appearing at the end. You're one with the wisps from the pyramid, right? Duex grinned as he held his pair of dual axes, which he spun in his hands. I hear those little aliens pack the power of stars. Let's find out. He lunged at her and collided his weapons with Whisper's hammer construct. Okay. Nora coughed as the green smoke spread more across the street. I've had enough of this stink bomb. She brought out Magnild and converted it into its grenade launcher mode. Velvet, get clear, she shouted, hoping she could hear her before firing a bomb at the ground in the center of the smokescreen. This created an explosion that blew away much of the smoke, revealing not only Velvet and Nebula, both of whom had managed to jump backwards and avoid the explosion, but also their attacker. He was a rather tall and muscular man with a green sleeveless shirt, black cargo pants and boots with a silver armband and a gas mask over his face. Who are you? Velvet exclaimed as she pulled out her camera weapon while Nebula drew her crossbow. You can call me Green. The man commented as he reached behind him and quipped a pair of gauntlets before pounding them together. And I'm your worst nightmare. On the east side of the city, Gwen and Du both found themselves faced with Rosa Schwein, who wore a skin-tight black suit and a gas mask over her face to hide her identity. Du threw a pair of knives at her which Rosa ran straight for. And in that moment, Rosa's body became a blur as the knives phased right through her, much to Du's shock which left her open for Rosa to deliver a palm strike to her stomach, followed by more rapid punches and palm strikes to knock her down. A tornado was then erected underneath Rosa, courtesy of Gwen and her spear's wind dust. But when Gwen smirked, thinking she had her opponent beaten, Rosa's blurry form shot up from the ground to deliver an uppercut to her jaw, knocking Gwen into the air before performing an axe kick to knock her down. At the same time, Rouge and Fox both found themselves on the defensive end of Trois, modified Egg Walker, which was currently equipped with Gatling guns on both sides and fired in all directions, forcing Rouge and Fox to fly or dodge respectively and avoid the gunfire. Rouge flew up into the air, and threw out purple hearts in its dual boomerang form which, rapidly spun and made their way to Trois. However, a shield appeared over the mech, which blocked purple hearts and knocked them to the ground as Rouge landed alongside Fox. Nice try. But it'll take more than that to stop me. The female jackal smirked. Well, this is gonna be a pain. Rouge commented. At the west side of Vacuo, Ren found himself ducking under a wave of green fire, courtesy of Catra with his green flame blade, and was once again forced on the defensive as the jackal charged him and swung his sword relentlessly at him. Forced back against the wall, Ren had no choice but to cross Stormflower's blades to block the Catra's fire sword, but from that a burst of green light pushed Ren down as his eyes were forced shut, allowing for Catra to slash at him and send him skidding across the ground. Usually when someone gets sliced with this, they scream in agony and get a third-degree burn. Catra commented. Is it because of that aura your people use? Ren said nothing as he took a few moments to catch his breath and looked past Catra to see Yatsuhashi and Octavia struggling against their opponent. The enemy in question was Argento, not that they knew due to the gas mask that covered his own face. He dodged Yatsuhashi's massive sword, fulcrum, and delivered a kick to his head before swerving to avoid a lunge from Octavia's dagger and ducked to swipe his feet and knock Octavia back first to the ground. I'm curious as to test the limits of your aura's power, Catra said, forcing Ren to draw his attention back to him. Shall we see how strong it truly is? He pointed his green flaming blade at him. You're certainly welcome to try. Ren challenged. Oh, not this guy again. Coco had pulled out her enormous machine gun, Jonduya, and pointed it forward as she stood alongside John, Cardin, and Umber, each of whom had their respective weapons, as well as they faced a single opponent who stood in the middle of the street to face them directly. Uno had swiftly drawn his katana. Huntsmen are supposed to be this world's greatest warriors, yet all that stand before me are children. Still, it would be unwise to underestimate my foes. He made a stance with his blade as he gestured with his hand to come to him. Come, young ones, let me test your mettle. Whoa boy, John muttered. Why do I suddenly have a bad feeling about all this? Back in the abandoned dust mine, Shadow took the lead as he, Omega, Star, and Pyrrha trekked through the underground tunnels, the two maidens using flames from their hands to light the way. Along the path, they didn't encounter much resistance, save for a few stray mermaids, which Shadow and Omega were quick to eliminate before they could alert any more. But despite the easiness of the situation, the atmosphere of the tunnel was anything but easy and bearable. The deeper they went, the more holes along the wall and ceilings they could see, holes that looked like they were made by animals when digging underground, or Grimm in this case. Not only that, but they also saw pieces of broken equipment and various bones scattered along the floor, skulls being among them. The minute she saw the bones, Pyrrha's eyes briefly closed as she silently paid respect to all those who lost their lives in these tunnels. She also shivered as she could only imagine what a death like that could be. These weren't huntsmen putting their lives on the line, but workers simply doing their jobs, only to stumble upon oversized insect-based Grimm that ate them alive. Any attempts to run were only futile, and all these people would meet their demise in these darkened tunnels, away from their friends and loved ones. It's unusual we haven't seen too many Grimm down here. Star commented. I don't like it. It is confirmed that the longer Grimm live, the more intelligent they become. Omega said. There is no estimation of how long these mermaids have been alive as they've primarily dwelled underground. Though unlikely, it is possible that there could be more lying in wait for their prey to come. Another reason to get this done quickly. Shadow stated. I agree. Pyrrha said as well. If we find the emerald before Eggman does, it's unlikely he'll find this place and try to use it. Should Salem become involved however, that could drastically change. Shadow said seriously. She could awaken the whole nest and unleash it upon vacuo. Possible suggestion would be to destroy the mine itself via the dust veins. Omega offered. The mine will collapse and crush the mermaids. We do that and we're also likely to set them all loose ourselves. Star countered. We have no idea what else could be down here. Theodore and even Ozpin worried about the possibility of a mermaid queen that spawns these monsters, and if that's the case, we're all screwed. Correction. We have two maidens at our disposal, as well as the ultimate life form and Dr. Eggman's most powerful model. Omega debated. We can eliminate a large portion of the nest ourselves. Even the hard mermaids are not invincible if we use their armor and weight against them. But wouldn't it be easier to fight them outside on our terms, instead of doing it here where they have home field advantage? Star responded. A logical counter-argument. Omega conceded. I would prefer the scenario where victory is more likely to succeed. Glad we can agree, Tin Man. Star smiled. Pyrrha then looked to Star's weapon on her back. Excuse me, Star, do you mind if I ask about your weapon? It seems rather impressive. The current summer maiden smirked as she pulled out her staff weapon once more. Well, if you want to know, this is my personal weapon, she's hang. It's a 3-section staff that can function similar to nunchucks. That sounds like Sun's weapon, Pyrrha noted. Similar, but different. He actually based his weapon off mine. Star continued. His weapon has guns on it, but mine doesn't. On one end is a fan blade that can be infused with dust, or my maiden powers if I want. But this way you are able to use your powers without openly tipping off your enemies. Pyrrha realized. Got it in one. Star confirmed. The other end has a claw on it, which can function as a grappling hook for when I extend it by the chains, if I need to use it while also maintaining my cover if other people are around me, or even grab my enemies' weapons or their limbs to pull them in for a nasty punch and or kick. Though the claw can also be used as a bladed weapon too, like a spear if I gotta. Very impressive. Pyrrha smiled. Agreed. A simple yet effectively destructive weapon. Omega approved. Ah, thanks guys. Star smiled. Nice to talk about weapons as we venture into a dark tunnel filled with killer demon ants looking for a magic gemstone. Pyrrha couldn't stop herself from laughing at that. Yep, this was definitely the woman who raised Sun alright. Honestly, she considered herself very lucky to be blessed with a mentor like her, a kind and outgoing woman who made her be put at ease when around her, as well as had plenty of useful wisdom to offer. Just as she was fortunate enough to be blessed with the bonds she shared with Team JNPR, and those with Teams Dark, RWBY, and Sonic. Shadow, while still keeping his focus on what was in front of him, did briefly glance back to the company he had, making small talk and enjoying one another's presence. Before he knew it, a small smile graced his face as well, not minding this sort of company either. However, unbeknownst to all of them, their location was currently being tracked, far deeper underground, as none other than Eggman himself sat in the cockpit of his newest mech with Orbot and Cubot currently on monitor duty. "It appears we have company, boss," Orbot reported. "Seismic sensors indicate 4 individuals are above. Looks like Shadow's group has shown up," Cubot said. "We can always expect him to be punctual." Eggman grinned. "Time to spring our little trap and claim my Chaos Emerald." He pressed a few buttons on his console before a pair of screens lit up in front of him. Egg Cobras online. Omega stopped in his tracks. Alert. 2 unidentified Badnik signals detected. The group was put on alert immediately. "Circle up," Shadow ordered as they all put their backs to one another. "I don't understand. We didn't see anything up top, and Eggman's not one to be subtle," Pyrrha said. "Maybe he's not coming from the top," Star said as she gazed downward, and the moment she did, the entire tunnel began to shake and quake, causing the ceiling, walls, and floor to crack with rocks and debris falling from all directions. "He's tunneling up from below." "Omega, where's the enemy?" Shadow questioned. 2 simultaneous signals approaching us from the east and west ends. Omega reported, "They're surrounding us." In that instant, a pair of large robotic cobras broke out from the walls on both sides of the mines. They were almost identical in appearance, though one was red and the other was blue, and they resembled giant metal cobras with drills emerging from their open mouths. These were the egg cobras. Already much of the tunnel was beginning to collapse as the pair of egg cobras slithered and smashed through the floors and ceilings. Omega and Shadow acted first to fire their respective guns, but the bullets did minimal damage on their metallic frames. Not only that, they were far faster for their size as they drilled up and down into the ceiling and floor, further destabilizing the tunnel. "Clear the tunnel. Now," Shadow ordered, but before he had the chance, an explosion of fire ripped through the ground underneath him, causing the floor to break apart entirely and all 4 of them to fall into a black abyss below. As they fell, Pyrrha and Star were about to activate their maiden powers to enable flight, but before they had a chance they were grabbed by a series of metallic tentacles that emerged from the sides of the blue and red egg cobras respectively. And before Pyrrha had the chance to focus her semblance on the tentacles, a current of electricity ran through them to shock her and keep her from focusing before she was pulled closer to the blue egg cobra and thrown into an open hatch, which drilled into the side wall and away from the scene. Star was put in a similar situation, being thrown into the red egg cobra's hatch which then drilled and slithered away in the opposite direction. Shadow used his air shoes to halt his fall before dashing over to the cavern wall and drove a rondite into it for support, while Omega did the same via his jet boosters and dug his metallic claws into the wall, appearing at an angle on Shadow's left below him. "They've taken Pyrrha and Star," Shadow stated. "Their respective maiden powers, as well as Pyrrha's polarity, should make escaping for them a simple task." Omega replied. "That's not the issue. They were targeted specifically." Shadow's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You believe their maiden identities have been compromised?" Omega inquired. "Most likely. But how remains a mystery." Shadow was already trying to think of a potential list of suspects that could have purposely leaked the information. "We will inquire about this later," Omega said. Multiple grim targets incoming from below. All but confirming his alert, the sounds of insect wings and legs scaling the walls caused the pair to look down to see what looked like a large swarm of over 100 mermaids. Half of them climbed up along the cavern walls, with at least a dozen harb mermaids among them, and the other half flew with their own built-in wings. Shadow looked more annoyed than anything else. "Exterminate them quickly so we can find Pyrrha and Star." "With pleasure," Omega agreed as he and Shadow both let go and dove straight towards the grim swarm. Vacuo. Coco fired Janduya at Uno, who swiftly and quickly dodged all of her shots, dashing along the rooftop with ninja-like speed. "Hold still you little," she muttered. "Can't you just tear him up with your hype semblance?" Cardin questioned. "I'd rather capture the guy and interrogate him later than just kill him," Coco stated as she continued to shoot at him but failed to notice Uno swiftly drawing a set of kunai with his fingers, which he quickly threw at the giant gun Coco wielded, each of the kunai striking the barrel holes with masterful precision, much to Coco's surprise. Though she could use her hype semblance to tear through them easy and clear her gun out, This momentary distraction did leave her open for Uno to leap at her, land on her Janduya with his hands and perform a double kick at Coca's face, breaking her sunglasses and sending her crashing to the wall. John and Cardin both came at Uno from opposite sides, swinging Crocea Morse and the Executioner respectively at him, but Uno jumped over and allowed their own weapons to clash against each other before bringing his katana down on their conjoined weapons, knocking them to the ground and delivering a split kick. Though Cardin was kicked in the face and knocked back, John was quicker to use his shield and block Uno's kick. Though Uno now focused squarely on him swinging his katana relentlessly as John blocked it all with his shield. John dug his feet in and kept himself from being pushed back before pushing forward himself to try and overpower Uno before swinging Crocea Morse at him. However, Uno quickly ducked under this, sliced his katana at John's feet to knock him down and pointed his sword to his face. "You have potential, but that does not guarantee you a victory." His katana was caught by a whip-like snare and pulled away to the right, and while Uno held it firmly, he looked to the one who used said whip. "Are we here to talk, or fight?" Umber pulled out a second whip and snapped at Uno, forcing him to leap back and then back further as he heard the sounds of gunfire coming his way, courtesy of the recovered Coco, who angrily looked at him. "I like these." She held her broken sunglasses before resuming her firing on the swift-moving jackal. On the east side of the city, Rouge continued to fly upwards and avoid the gunfire and laser blast shot at her by Toi in her modified egg walker. But the female jackal was quick to level the playing field as she pressed a few key buttons in her customized mech, causing a pair of jet engines to activate before she flew to the sky in pursuit of Rouge. "This girl could give Tails quite a bit of trouble," Rouge commented as she flew with her opponent in hot pursuit. "But unlike him, if her way of fighting is in a robot, she's gotta be a rather poor fighter." The bat smirked as she switched from defense to offense, stretching out her wings to halt her flight before zooming straight for Toi, flying egg walker, swiftly dodging each long-ranged attack before quickly closing the gap. Rouge spun her body like a twister and then stuck her foot out, utilizing her screw kick move to strike at her enemy. However, Toi quickly activated the egg walker's barrier, shielding her and forcing Rouge upwards somewhat. "I saw that, she had to activate that manually, not like Eggman's current tech where a shield automatically pops up. It's old and outdated tech, and way more limited. So, let's test those limits, shall we?" Drawing both purple hearts out, Rouge brought the boomerang-like weapons together to combine them into their broadsword formation, before swinging the batwing-like blade downward with a mighty strike, hitting the shield before Toi retaliated with another cannon blast, deactivating the shield in the process, which only caused Rouge to smirk as an idea formed in her head. Down below, Fox, Dew, and Gwen swung their respective weapons at the masked Rosa, but her form quickly turned intangible as she allowed all the weapons to phase through her before striking Dew in the face as she phased through her and dealt a kick to her back to knock her towards Fox, who managed to flip back and avoid the girl smacking into him. "Hey, stay out of the way," Gwen told Fox as she threw her knives towards the masked Rosa, who turned her body intangible again as she swiftly closed the gap between herself and Gwen and dealt multiple punches and kicks across her body before jumping and phasing through Gwen's body, landing on her hands from behind and striking a kick at Gwen's back. However, in that instance, Fox had picked up on an unusual sound that came from their attacker whenever her semblance was activated. Or rather a lack of sound. Their attacker stops breathing whenever their body becomes intangible. Is it maybe they have to hold their breath? Or does it make their whole body intangible, lungs included, to make breathing impossible? Well, whatever the case, this was something he can use. At the west side, Ren was forced to be on the defensive as he used Stormflower's grappler to pull himself up onto a rooftop and fired his guns at Catra, who swung his own sword to send a wave of green flames his direction, which Ren limboed under to avoid. He dashed away in one direction while also shooting his guns at Catra, who retaliated by swinging his sword to send wave after wave of green fire, while also running alongside his foe. That is until Catra thrusted his sword forward to send a stream of green flames to the rooftop in front of Ren, forcing him to stop just as that rooftop was set ablaze. But this left him open for the rooftop he was on to explode with the same sort of attack, sending him crashing to the ground. "You're good," Catra complimented as Ren pushed himself up. "You recognize you have a disadvantage in close combat here, so you resort to long-ranged gunfire. Nice to see there are cautionary and smart fighters here on this world, rather than just brutes who settle for raw strength with no finesse or intelligence. I'm glad I could impress you. Ren remarked sarcastically as he fired Storm Flower at him again, but Catra rolled and swung his fire sword downward, sending a vertical wave of green flames Ren's way. And while he dashed to avoid that, Catra had used that moment to rush and close the gap, slicing Ren across his chest with his flaming sword and blasting him away, causing his own pink aura to flash. But in this situation, where I have the advantage in close-ranged combat, it would be foolish of me to not press on that advantage. Catra said as he stood over Ren and lunged his flaming sword at him again, which Ren caught in between his blades and forced upward to avoid the flames striking him. My goal is to win, after all. He was about to slice downward, but Ren had already anticipated this as he actually pushed forward, dropping Storm Flower to deal a double palm strike to Catra and push him back, and then quickly grabbed Storm Flower before they could even hit the ground and fired the grapplers from both, with one entangling Catra by his left foot and the other to knock the fire sword out of his hand, pulling Catra in to kick him in the face. As is mine, Ren retaliated. Let's see how well you fare now that I hold the close-ranged advantage. Catra rubbed his mouth, looking to see some blood on his hand before a slight smile appeared on his face. At the same time, Yatsuhashi and Octavia were having an incredibly hard time trying so much as landing a single strike on the masked Argento. Their assailant was far more agile than either of them would like to admit, especially Octavia, who was growing more and more frustrated as her opponent didn't even seem to have a weapon. Stop dodging, you piece of. She thrusted her dagger at him, but he caught her by her arm and threw a palm strike to Octavia's face and then a roundhouse kick to the same area to further disorient her and knock her into the sand. Yatsuhashi swung fulcrum at him, but Argento swiftly limboed underneath the swing and slid past him before leaping at the larger young man from behind to deal a punch across his face and landed on his hands before sticking his feet out for a spinning kick attack which forced Yatsuhashi to use the flat of fulcrum to shield himself, but he was too slow to even try that as the rapid swinging feet hit him dead on and knocked him down. What's going on here? Yatsuhashi questioned as he tried to pick himself up. This guy's agile, but it's more than that. He looked to his hand and tried to flex it. Why do I feel so sluggish? He couldn't get his thoughts together as the masked Argento was already over him and stretched out his foot to Yatsuhashi's face. Back on the south side, Nora swung Magnild's hammer form at Green, who caught it by the pole and threw a punch to her face with his gloved fist. And the second the glove made contact, a fiery explosion sent her crashing through a building. The hell? Nora whipped her face. That felt like a punch from Yang's gauntlets, but those looked like normal gloves. How can they explode like that? Unless. She looked through the hole to see Velvet and Nebula engaging their masked enemy in close combat. The former had already used her camera to create hardlight copies of Milo and Akoo, which she swung at Green with the exact same fighting style as Pyrrha, which did force Green on the defensive. Nebula chose to take advantage of this by remaining at a distance with her crossbow and was able to fire successful shots into Green's shoulders, though his aura did protect him. Seeing how he was in a pinch, Green crossed his arms as another cloud of green smoke spread out from his arms, which quickly spread across the street, engulfing Velvet and Nebula. That's when it all clicked for Nora. His gas can explode. Get out, she shouted as loudly as she could. Velvet heard Nora's cry and tried to jump backwards, but Green had already brought both his gloved fists down, igniting the fire dust lined into them and creating a small spark. Boom! Asterisk. The entire street lit up in a powerful explosion. The force pushed Nora back even further, though she was not swept up in the resulting fire. Unfortunately, that was not the case for Velvet and Nebula. Though Velvet did jump back a bit from the denser gas and brought up the hardlight Akoo shield to protect herself, the force of the blast did shatter the artificial shield and knock her back. Nebula, on the other hand, took the full force of the blast, which shattered her aura before she was sent flying and crashing onto a wall on the farthest end of the street. She slid to the ground, completely unconscious and no longer able to fight. The explosion had caught Whisper's attention as well and would have helped, but was forced to refocus her attention on Duex, who brought his dual axes down onto her, which she blocked with her Wispen's hammer construct. Stay focused on the fight in front of you. He grinned maliciously before sliding up and over her to land behind and tried to slice his right axe at her, but hovered up thanks to her Wispen's hover mode and jumped a reasonable distance before switching her weapon over to its spike mode, unleashing rapid-fire pink spikes at Duex, who ran along the side to avoid the deadly energy spikes before curving around to close the distance. He linked his axes together to form a double-bladed axe weapon, with axe blades on each end of the pole, which he spun around like a helicopter blade to block the energy spikes. When he closed the distance, Whisper was forced to switch to her Wispin's cube mode and engage in close combat again. Velvet. Nora ran to the recovering Velvet and helped her to her feet. "You good?" "I'm fine, how did you know about the gas exploding?" she asked. "When he punched me, I felt the same kind of force from Yang's gauntlets." Nora explained. "He's got fire dust lined in his gloves, not to mention that gas stunk like farts, which are flammable. Then it's not simply green-colored smoke, but methane." Velvet realized. "And that is far too deadly to be in for too long, or otherwise." They saw the masked Green march towards them menacingly as he cracked his gloved knuckles, causing a spark of fire to emanate from them. But while that made Velvet somewhat more intimidated, Nora found herself focused on the gas mask their attacker wore. Why wear a gas mask unless this guy could be affected by his own methane smoke? "I think I have an idea," Nora said as she whispered something to Velvet, who quickly nodded before they both faced Green once again. "Hey Stinkbomb, is that all you got? My grandma can punch harder than you." The gas-masked goon growled. "You're going to eat those words." He waved his arms to spread a cloud of green smoke around the area once again, but rather than avoid it, Nora charged in headlong with Magnild and swung it at Green, who caught it by the pole again, but Nora let her hammer go as she threw a punch right into his groin, causing him to recoil and gave her a chance to pull out a cartridge of lightning dust and hammed it into her side. By the time Green recovered, Nora's body was supercharged as they locked their hands together, pressing each of their strength against the other. But Green broke the stalemate by letting go and hooking Nora under her arms with both of his and ran to slam her into the nearest wall. Nora still tried to push back however, despite the green smoke being inhaled which made it harder to breathe and causing her eyes to water further. But she endured it as she kicked herself off the wall to push Green backwards so that he landed on his back. And while he was down, Nora used the last bit of enhanced strength to pound the ground and clear up some of the green smoke in the area, though there was still plenty there. Green then picked up Nora and raised her well above his head. "You're done." He looked ready to bring her down onto his knee to shatter her aura in one go. Bang! Asterisk. The sound of a gunshot echoed through the street as a bullet, made entirely out of hardlight dust, came through the partially smoke and landed a clean shot at his gas mask, breaking the front of it off and exposing Green's face to his own smoke. "What?" He looked in surprise to see some distance in front of him, outside the green hazardous smoke cloud, Velvet holding a hardlight copy of Crescent Rose that was converted into its rifle mode. She had waited for Nora to clear up some of the smoke and give her a clearer shot, and the second she saw the exposed gas mask, even with some of the green smoke partially obscuring it, she fired. "You!" Green snarled at her and was prepared to throw Nora at him, but she had used this opportunity to escape his grip, fall behind him and hook her arm around his neck to bring him down and force his face into the ground that had some of the gas still present. "What's wrong? Can't take your own stink?" Nora exclaimed as she held the struggling Green in her grasp. "Come on, smell it." She forced his face further into the ground. "Smell it, smell it." However, Green was able to slam the back of his head into Nora's face, forcing her to let go as he grabbed her by her own head and slammed her face into his knee. "You think I can't take my own smoke?" He looked at her furiously, his eyes were red and watery, indicating that his own gas did have an effect on him, but not to the extent she hoped. "I'm going to blow your face off." He pulled his free fist back and prepared to punch her with his gloved fist, only for it to get hooked by the scythe blade of the hardlight Crescent Rose. "No, you won't." Velvet spun on her hardlight weapon's pole and performed a kick to Green's face, forcing him to let go of Nora before she performed a spinning rapid swing attack, similar to a method she saw RWBY employ before, quickly and rapidly striking Green across his body before he attempted to recover and crossed his arms. But before he had the chance to counterattack, Nora had recovered and grabbed Magnild to come at him with a mighty swing to the side of his head. His own green aura flashed before he was sent rolling across the ground. Not giving him the chance to get back up, Nora converted her weapon into its grenade launcher mode and fired a rocket, sending Green up in an explosion before he fell back down with a thud and his aura finally shattered, and he fell unconscious. Nora took a moment to recover as she fell to her knees and held Magnild close. Nora, Velvet was by her side and tried to help her up. I'm fine, just give me a second. Nora took a few breaths. Go help, whisper. Velvet was unsure about leaving her friend behind, but the sounds of explosions and flashes of colored light above her drew her attention to the surrounding rooftops. Looks like Whisper might be in a jam herself. I'll be up in a second, just go. Nora repeated. Okay. Velvet nodded as she quickly ran and jumped along the side of a building to go and aid their mutual comrade. Back on the north side, Uno continued to dodge the repeated gunfire and whip snaps that Coco and Umber threw at him, but between his own agility and swordsmanship, it was nearly impossible for them to land a hit on him. As they forced him backwards, Uno found himself once again facing John and Cardin, who chose to fight in close quarters. Cardin brought the executioner down, but Uno easily blocked it with his katana, though it did seem to leave him open for John to rush him with a slice of his sword, and while Uno did jump back he rushed John again, who blocked the sword strike with his shield before turning around, revealing Cardin, who landed a successful hit with his mace to knock the jackal mercenary to the wall of a building. Decent teamwork, Uno noted for John and Cardin before looking to Coco. And that one seems to focus more on long-range weapons, but I wouldn't be surprised if she can handle herself in short range as well. With that in mind, he then glanced towards Umber before flipping up to land on the rooftops before quickly dashing across the top of the row of buildings, further dodging the bullets from Coco's massive minigun. He then spotted an alleyway between two buildings and dove straight into it. Little freak's getting away, Cardin exclaimed. No, he's not, Umber called to them. I know these streets. Go and cut him off from the other side. She pointed to the perpendicular street close to John and Cardin and then turned to Coco. You can shoot at him and limit his range, and I'll come in from above. Coco nodded in understanding. Boxing him in did seem like the best idea to limit this jackal's movements. Sounds like a plan. She saw Umber use her whips to pull herself up onto the roof on the right side of the alley before Coco ran into it just as John and Cardin ran as fast as they could along the intersecting street, hoping to get to the other side quickly enough. Coco ran through the darkened alley at top speeds, with the only source of light coming from the starry skies above her. It got to the point however that the narrow alley made it hard for her to carry Janduya in its massive gun form, forcing her to convert it back to its suitcase, which was odd given how the plan to capture this jackal depended on her gun. But the former Beacon student looked in surprise to see she had run into a dead end. What the hell? Looking around her, Coco found there were no other possible turns to take. It was just a straight shot from here back to the street she just came from. What happened? Umber said this was a straight shot to the other side, right? Suddenly, Coco felt herself bound and ensnared by a pair of whips from above before they slammed her into the wall behind her. Looking ahead, Coco gasped to see none other than Umber herself landing in front of her, her whips in hands. Umber, what the hell are you? Before Coco could even attempt to escape, she suddenly found herself unable to move. She couldn't even speak. It was almost like she was turned to stone, but still aware of everything around her. That included Umber, who had taken off her sunglasses, to reveal a pair of glowing yellow eyes that stared at her menacingly. Sorry, Miss Fashion Sense. But you're not going anywhere. Meanwhile, John and Cardin were already on the other street on the opposite side of the line of buildings, but as they ran down it, John began to notice something was off. Cardin, wait. The former bully stopped in his tracks. What is it? Look. John gestured to the buildings in front of them, which were so closely packed together that it was almost impossible to tell them apart. They may as well be all part of the same building. Where's the alley? Cardin noticed it as well. Umber said it came out on the other side, right? She knows these streets. She did indeed say that, but while John didn't quite understand what exactly was going on either, a voice in the back of his head was giving him the answer and he didn't like it. I think we've been set up. Smart. Looking behind, the pair spotted Uno looking at them with his katana in one hand, a pair of kunai in the other, and a stoic look on his face, like he was waiting for them. Let this be an important lesson of warfare, boys. Take every advantage of your environment, including those that live in it, he said before rushing them. Meanwhile, back underground, Pyrrha couldn't see anything going on right now as she appeared to be in pitch black darkness, likely within the egg cobra that appeared out of nowhere. She could certainly feel the metallic bindings of the tentacles that was keeping her body secure within the moving mech. She could also feel the vibrations all around her and could tell that the egg cobra she was confined in was currently moving, likely drilling towards its programmed destination. However, that also left her concerned as she knew she was targeted specifically, and likely Star was as well by that second egg cobra. And for them both to be taken alive, only one theory came to mind. Somehow, Eggman learned of their status as the Fall and Summer Maidens respectively. But the question was how? But she'll figure that out later. Right now, she wasn't about to sit and wait for her to be delivered on a silver platter. Not when her friends were in the middle of a grim nest like this. Even if they could handle themselves, she will not abandon them. Time to test that electromagnetic theory. Pyrrha said as her eyes glowed a bright red, activating her maiden powers and her polarity semblance simultaneously. She generated an electrical aura around her body as well as connected her polarity to the metallic tentacles that had bound her, which then spread outward to the surrounding mech. From the outside, the blue egg cobra surged with a flash of electricity and magnetic powers that ripped through its insides. And a second later, the entire device shut down and collapsed on the ground in a smoking heap. 2 seconds later, a blade was pierced out from its back before it circled around, creating a hole in the disabled mech before Pyrrha climbed out. Taking a look around, Pyrrha could see she was in a near pitch black tunnel that looked like it had been carved out already. And from the lack of mining equipment, this was part of the dust refinery operation from above. Eggman, she thought to herself. He must have planned this in advance. But how could he have known of the Chaos Emerald's location or that we would be here? Somebody in Vacuo is helping him. She pulled out her scroll and looked to see the device was completely short-circuited, likely from her customized EMP. That's no surprise. I suppose my only option is to go back the way I came. Before she could hop off the disabled egg cobra and try to regroup with her friends, a dust twister came up from out of nowhere and completely engulfed Pyrrha, taking her by surprise and forcing her to close her eyes. She didn't even get the chance to regain her senses as she felt someone strong grab her from behind with one arm wrapping around her body to pin her arms to her side and the other to place a large hand over her face. She was then felt an intense surge of heat spread all over her body, like she was suddenly hit by a flamethrower at close range. Careful, Bertilik, Carmen said to her partner who held Pyrrha tightly. I don't want to scar that pretty face of hers. Reel it in, Carmen. Bertilik barked as he continued to superheat Pyrrha. We got our orders. Bring this one in alive and, suddenly, Pyrrha's body was supercharged with lightning once again, forcing Bertilik to let her go before she turned around to unleash point-blank lightning bolt at him that blasted him to the tunnel wall, much to Carmen's surprise. So much for simple freelancers. Carmen looked to see Pyrrha recover as she already had Milo and Akoo drawn. I would have thought you drew the line at working for a tyrannical and psychopathic dictator. Meh, beggars can't be choosers, sweetie. The rogue huntress shrugged nonchalantly as Bertilik picked himself back up and drew his own mace. I'm not certain what you two have been told of this place, but I'll tell you anyway. Pyrrha began. We are standing within a nest of dangerous grimm that were too much for professional huntsmen, so much so that the kingdom of Vacuo itself, and even the other kingdoms of Remnant, sealed this place off to avoid a swarm of these monsters escaping. If we fight here, we risk that swarm escaping. Even if you don't care for Vacuo, I'm not certain you're willing to throw your own lives away. So, here's my proposal. Let me go, and you two walk away. Can't do that. Bertilik shook his head. We got our orders. Let me put this as bluntly as I can. Working for Eggman may be the last mistake you two ever make. Pyrrha stated seriously. Just ask the White Fang. Oh, it's not just Eggman, little Pyrrha. There's so much going on here in Vacuo then you know. Carmen pointed out. But you're not wrong about all those grim bugs either, so here's our offer. Just come with us and I promise you won't be hurt. We might have tie you up or something, but it'll only be for appearance sake to keep the dock off our backs. I don't want to have to hurt a pretty little thing like you, and we got strict orders not to kill you, but if I have to, her cocky smile faded as a deathly serious glare appeared on her face. I will beat you to within an inch of your life. Pyrrha glared as she took a combative stance. I'd like to see you try. Carmen shook her head with disappointment. Have it your way. She drew a pair of say as Bertilik smirked and held his mace. At the same time, the red egg cobra continued in the opposite direction, slithering its way down a pre-carved tunnel with its own captive inside. That is until it began to freeze over from the inside. Ice appeared out from all the cracks of the egg cobra's shell and began to spread all over, which eventually led to the egg cobra itself slowing down until it came to an eventual stop. And when it did, it looked completely frozen. This allowed for a hole to be punched open from the top as Star broke her way out. The summer maiden rolled her shoulder like she just got finished with a workout. Well, that was fun. She stepped off the frozen robot and looked around for any possible signs of the enemy. Ya know, I love hide and seek as much as the next thrill seeker, but I kinda got some friends to get back to. So, wouldn't you mind showing yourselves? I promise not to beat you up too badly. She didn't appear to get any kind of response, which only caused her to look partially annoyed. You should know that even I can't see you right now, it won't stop me from finding you. It was true. One other benefit that came from her semblance was that by spotting people's critical weak points, stargazing could be used by extension to locate anyone who was hiding from her. However, before she even had the chance to use her semblance, the sounds of insect-like shrills further down the tunnel drew her attention, causing her to shift her gaze towards a group of 4 incoming mermaids flying straight for her. Acting quickly, Star drew her weapon sheath hang and threw out the 3-section staff, using the chains to extend it as the claw attachment pierced and grabbed one flying mermaid, which she then used to pull down into a spiraling kick to smash its head apart. Even as the other 3 closed the distance, Star spun her 3-section staff like a master to easily swat and slice apart the mermaids, without even using her maiden powers. Zap! Asterisk. She felt an electric surge rip into her back. Though her aura did protect her, she quickly turned around and spun sheath hang downward to bisect what looked like a mermaid that had lightning dust infused into its body. This ended up revealing 3 more mermaids that appeared to have fire dust sticking out of their bodies and then charged for her. And while Star charged back, swiping and slicing sheath hang's claw and fan blade, infusing the latter attachment with ice via a subtle use of her maiden powers to extinguish any flames that they could potentially use, it didn't seem to stop something else striking her at her side with enough force to knock her down. But she quickly recovered as she fell, thrusting her weapon's claw end into the ground and spun herself around to deal a mighty kick to a mermaid that seemed to attack her from behind while also hauling her weapon over herself and bringing the fan blade down to send a wave of wind to slice through a line of mermaids that appeared out of nowhere. Before she knew it, Star looked to find herself surrounded by a swarm of mermaids that began to crawl up and around her from both ends of the tunnels, and many of them seemed to be infused with various types of dust as well. However, unbeknownst to her, none of these mermaids were real, merely an illusion conjured up by Emerald, who was remaining hidden behind a boulder as she focused her own hallucination semblance directly on Star. Mercury landed by her side and looked pumped and ready. You got this, Em. Her semblance depends on her eyes, right? Emerald replied. Then I can fool it just like everyone else. And like what we were told, her semblance doesn't work on Grimm, only people. How do we know she won't just go all full maiden on us and bring down the whole tunnel? Mercury asked. The Grimm I'm having her see are all infused with dust. Emerald said. I'm giving the impression she's near a dust vein and one wrong move with her powers could make the whole mine collapse. You keep doing hit and run attacks, and I'll cover you. We'll wear her down. Well, doesn't this bring back memories? Mercury smirked. This felt very similar to when they and Cinder ambushed Amber and tried to take her powers. But we don't need Cinder to pull this one off. He kicked his prosthetic heels together as they surged with electricity. My legs and semblance are all that we need. Emerald had mixed feelings about that. She could tell that Mercury had given her a genuine compliment and had confidence in her own abilities, which did flatter her. But at the same time, she didn't like being reminded that Cinder was gone. She shook her head as to focus on that later, best to focus on the target in front of them. Remember, don't kill her. Just knock her unconscious, Emerald instructed. Yeah, I hear ya. Mercury understood as he charged forward, shooting himself up into the air with his air shoe attachments and then throwing his foot down while Star sliced her weapon, which she thought was cutting down the flying mermaid that was already onto her, but that split moment of bringing her weapon down as the slice was finished, left her open for Mercury, whom she couldn't see, land a successful electric kick at her front. At the same time, the chasm that was previously dark was now lit up with flashes of red, yellow, and various elemental explosions along with the sounds of gunfire and insect shrills as the ultimate life form and last of the E100 series laid waste to every mermaid grim they saw. Shadow used his homing attack to dash from one flying mermaid to another, and then another, smashing and slashing through each one before going for one that crawled along the cavern walls and then performed a spin dash on a diagonal angle to the right, spinning down the walls as he carved his way through all the crawling mermaids before making his way towards a RWBY mermaid. Shadow then shot forward with his air shoes, drawing a rondite and sliced off its front legs before touching the wall as he zoomed past his enemy and repeated the process, zigzagging twice over to cut off all 6 of its legs before sending it plummeting into the darkened abyss below. He then spotted 7 flying mermaids gunning for him and about to swarm him, but he teleported past and above them before throwing an explosive chaos spear into the center of the group to destroy them at once. Omega grappled with the pincers of a RWBY mermaid and easily ripped them off before plunging them into its eyes, and then jumped upwards before firing his machine guns at the legs of the RWBY mermaid and send that one falling as well. He used his right hand to grapple onto the wall before firing ice dust rounds from the gun on his left hand to not only freeze a line of crawling mermaids that was advancing towards them, but also creating a makeshift barrier to keep those below at bay briefly before turning his attention to a group of flying mermaids that came at him, which he quickly shot down with his normal bullets. Once the flyers were clear, Omega saw the ice breaking apart as a second RWBY mermaid smashed its way through its frozen brethren, clearing a path for the crawlers to come at him. However, Omega leapt from the wall and used his jet boosters to slow his descent before he fired a gravity dust missile straight for the RWBY mermaid's head, blasting it clean off and simultaneously creating a shockwave that shook up the entire wall, causing it to break apart, leading to several more mermaids to fall off, and any that were caught up in the resulting rockslide, as well as the falling headless body of the RWBY mermaid below. Shadow had went for another RWBY mermaid as well and used his spin dash to break off its pincers, cracking the armor surrounding its face before appearing directly above it. Using a rondite's rifle mode, Shadow shot out the RWBY mermaid's eyes, blinding it before landing on its face and using it as a perch to shoot from a rondite with one hand while also throwing chaos spears with the other at all the mermaids that crawled around him, clearing away dozens in less than a minute. Shadow looked downward and saw Omega in a slow descent, spinning around in a 360-degree angle with his gun arms held outward to shoot down all the climbing mermaids, but also saw another group of flyers about to come at him from below. Leaping off briefly, Shadow threw a chaos spear at the wall the blinded RWBY mermaid was on, causing it to break apart before it fell and directed his descent towards his teammate. Omega. Steel tornado. Acknowledged. Omega responded as he reached with both his hands, grabbing both of Shadow's before spinning around in the same motion, with Shadow further increasing the speed with boosts from his own air shoes. This resulted in a rapidly spinning technique that when all the flying mermaids attempted to swarm them, they were quickly and ruthlessly obliterated, blown to pieces the second they attempted to make contact. Once all the flyers were eliminated, Omega spoke. Commencing release in 3, 2, 1. Omega let Shadow go and threw him straight to the wall on one side, all the gathered momentum being used as Shadow let loose a powerful spin dash to obliterate the wall that had dozens of mermaids, including 2 RWBY mermaids, while Omega simultaneously fired a volley of rudimentary missiles on the wall on the other side, making sure to aim for the gaps between the mermaids there, collapsing that well in the process. The result was all the remaining mermaids falling to the abyss below. Shadow had stood on a ledge that resulted from his crash and watched as Omega used his jet boosters to slow his descent once more and move in the same direction and then grappled onto the wall just below him. All Grim in the area have been eliminated. Omega reported. Pyrrha and Star. Shadow inquired. Star's scroll is detected at 47.23 meters above us, and 59.64 meters due north. Omega answered. But I cannot detect Pyrrha's scroll, likely destroyed or disabled. Though Pyrrha's capture is unlikely, I suspect use of an EMP by combing her semblance with the electric abilities as a maiden, a theory she has toyed with often since obtaining these abilities. Which would result in her scroll being taken offline. Shadow grimaced, but it couldn't be helped. How further down is this pit? Another 39.81 meters. Omega responded. But I am detecting a badnik signal down there, a rather large one. And of greater importance, the Chaos Emerald. Then we retrieve the emerald. Shadow insisted. I'll use chaos control to find Pyrrha and Star and then we'll leave. A confrontation with Eggman, or one of his badniks, is inevitable. Omega put in, preparing to engage with extreme prejudice. With that, they both leapt further down into the pit, letting gravity take them most of the way. After a few good seconds of falling however, and judging the appropriate height, Shadow and Omega used their air shoes and jet boosters respectively to slow their descent until they touched down on the cavern ground. Looking around at their new surroundings, the two members of Team Dark found themselves in a rather large cave that stretched out in several directions, with multiple natural cave formations acting as pillars to support the ceiling above them. Omega, Shadow looked to his companion. Scanning. The Chaos Emerald appears to be moving. Omega reported. Both it and the Badnik signal are closing in on us. Then Eggman already has it. Shadow growled. Negative. Omega countered. Long-range sensors indicate the Emerald and Badnik are approaching us from opposite directions, with the Badnik signal already upon us. Before Shadow could inquire further, the ground on their immediate left broke apart, forcing the two backwards as they looked up to see a large and metallic mech appear before them. The machine was over 40 feet tall and had the appearance of a giant mechanical snake resembling a cobra, one clad in golden armor with various blue stripes lining down its body. It had something of an Egyptian theme to it due to its color scheme and the face having a pharaoh's headpiece built into it that seemed to mix with the metal cobra hood. And of course, all of that was surrounding a giant golden metal face that looked almost exactly like Eggman. Oh ho ho ho. Eggman's laugh came from the mech's speakers. Shadow, Omega, good to see you two again. Hope you don't mind us crashing your part. Us? Shadow questioned. The answer to that came as a hatch opened up from the top of the cockpit and a dark figure leapt out before leaping onto the ground in front of the pair. With his red sword already glowing, he looked towards Shadow with a bloodthirsty and eager look in his eyes. We meet again, Shadow the Hedgehog. Zero. Shadow narrowed his eyes at the leader of the Jackal Squadron. Aligned with Eggman, it seems. An opportunity I can't afford to pass up. Zero smirked. In addition to you, this world of Remnant is full of powerful fighters for us to challenge, even Sonic the Hedgehog is here. Challenging him, and all those other huntsmen he's allied with should certainly be fun. After I've slain you, of course. Then you'll never so much as lay your eyes on any of them. The Black Hedgehog glared. Don't expect your little maiden friends to help you out here, Shadow. Eggman said to him from the cockpit of his mech. A few associates of mine are keeping them busy as we speak. So, he does know that Pyrrha and Star are the maidens. This attack was planned. Shadow narrowed his eyes seriously. We'll worry about that after we get out of this. I am very eager to test my newest creation against you. Behold, the egg Uraeus. Eggman boasted. Let us see how well it fares against you with the Chaos Emerald you've already acquired. We don't have it. Shadow told him. Eggman's wild grin vanished as he only looked in confusion. Say what? We do not have the emerald. Shadow repeated. Initially, I thought you had it. Even Zero looked somewhat confused as he glanced towards the egg Uraeus with Eggman being just as curious himself. Orbot. Cubot. You told me the emerald was heading this way. We did, boss. Orbot confirmed. The radar detected the Chaos Emerald moving toward our location. Since Shadow is also done here, it was logical to assume he got to it first. Well, somebody's got it. Cubot said as he looked to the radar screen in front of him. And whoever does, they're right on top of us. On top, or below, Eggman looked downward. The ground once again began to shake, even more than it did before. This forced Shadow, Omega, and Zero to all scatter with even the egg Uraeus slithering backwards to avoid a burst of rock from the ground where they all once stood, almost like something massive was digging its way out from underneath them. And what that thing was a massive harb mermaid grim, one far larger than the ones they've faced so far. In fact, this one was of the same scale as harb mermaids were to regular mermaids. Just as harb mermaids were 3 times as large as the worker drones, this one was 3 times larger than those very harb mermaids. Though it was just shorter than the egg Uraeus, it was no less intimidating as its body was extremely thick with bone-white armor that converged nearly every inch of its body. Shadow even made a mental comparison to the size of the bio-lizard, with this creature appearing to be just as big. But what made this creature even more unsettling was the glowing and multicolored veins of dust that stretched in all directions across its body. Red, blue, yellow, orange, green, white, and even purple. Though what caught everyone's attention was the yellow chaos emerald embedded in its forehead between the glowing eyes. The emerald! Zero exclaimed. It's infused itself into that harb mermaid. Eggman shouted. Not only that, it looks like this one had already been infused with dust from this mine's natural deposits. The emerald has further mutated it, causing the creature to grow larger and for all the dust inside it to become more powerful. What does that make it, a king mermaid? Orbot asked. Oh, how about a pharaoh mermaid? Cubot offered, causing Eggman and Orbot to look at him questionably. Well, we do got an Egyptian theme going on, and pharaohs are like kings, plus that thing also has a chaos emerald on its head like a jewel piece, so. It is rather catchy, Orbot mused. Very well. We shall dub this creature the pharaoh mermaid. Ironic, because pharaoh ants on Earth are actually really small compared to other ant species. I don't care what we call it, that thing has my emerald. Eggman exclaimed. Zero. We'll destroy it, and Shadow and Omega, and retrieve my prize. Zero chuckled with anticipation as he once again eyed Shadow as well as Omega, both reading their own powers and/or weapons to face off against the Jackal Mercenary, Eggman Mech, and the Chaos Emerald and Dust-infused Grim. Chaos energy surged in one hand as Shadow held a Rondite in the other. Bring it. Done. This chapter ended up a tad shorter than I expected, certainly shorter than the previous battle, which would make sense as we had much to cover there with not just one but two kingdoms. Here, it's a bit more focused as we have Team Dark JNPR being in quite the predicament against the forces of Eggman and the Crown. In the main city of Vacuo, the rest of Team JNPR and their allies find themselves caught in a dark web of deceit as they are separated from one another and are forced to contend with the Jackal Squad and agents of the Crown, all of whom prove to be capable fighters. But of course, the heroes aren't going down without a fight as we get a moment from Nora to show her using her brain and brawn to win a fight. But how will the others fare when they are clearly having trouble against their respective opponents? At the same time, Shadow, Omega, Pyrrha, and Star have made their way to the abandoned and grim-infested dust refinery, and despite being able to adapt to the ant-like mermaids, they too are in quite the bind. Just like their friends in Vacuo, the group is separated from one another and are faced with dangerous opponents. Pyrrha is about to face off against Carmen and Bertilic. Star is stuck in a hallucination created by Emerald which can fool the former's semblance as it's dependent on her eyes and is under constant hit-and-run attacks from Mercury with the intent of wearing her down. And finally, Shadow and Omega are about to engage in a three-way battle against Eggman's Egg Uraeus and Zero against a supercharged dust-infused harb mermaid that is in possession of the yellow Chaos Emerald. The battles continue in the next chapter. Will our heroes be able to escape the underground battle with the Chaos Emerald, and those in Vacuo prevail against their attackers? Or will Eggman and the Crown claim their own victory? Find out next time. Until then, stay safe and stay healthy out there. And this is the end of part 24 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't really leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.